Soft on crime, liberal bail policies mean that there are more violent repeat offenders on our streets than ever. When will this Prime Minister finally take responsibility and keep these violent thugs behind bars where they belong?
The laws on bail that we currently have, Mr. Speaker, are clear. If one poses a threat to society, he or she should not be out on bail. It's a complex issue. It will require a number of different responses. And, Mr. Speaker, we're working together.
All right, the opposition Conservatives have tabled a bill to beef up bail reform for repeat violent criminals, and calls for reform surged after OPP Constable Greg Piershala was gunned down in late December. Today, the Globe and Mail is reporting that the suspect in the case was out on bail, released in part because of his Indigenous heritage. I want to bring in MPs to talk about this. Greg Fergus is the Parliamentary Secretary to the Prime Minister. Frank Caputo is a Conservative Associate Justice critic who tabled that private member's bill on bail reform. Now, we've asked for a new Democrat MP to join us, but no one was made available. But gentlemen, thank you very much for coming in. I'd like to start, Mr. Fergus, if I could, with some of the revelations from my colleague Sean Fine in the Globe and Mail about Randall McKenzie, who the judge released calling it an iffy release, but saying his Indigenous status because of the changes in bail laws required it. But the allegations is that Mr. McKenzie encountered his former girlfriend's new partner in a mall parking lot, shattered the windshield of the man's car with children inside the car, stabbed the man twice after chasing him, then allegedly punched his ex-girlfriend in the head, and then allegedly headbutted a police officer, and was found to have had an unloaded handgun. This is according to transcripts of the bail record. When you look at those allegations and the fact that he was released, have we found the balance on this issue? This seems imbalanced given what happened afterwards.
First of all, it was a terrible thing that happened to the victims, the girlfriend and her new boyfriend. And secondly, it's terrible law to make law on the basis of one case. What you have to do is take a look at the whole approach. The Justice Minister and the Public Safety Minister this morning had a telephone call or video conference call with the federal provincial police representatives. So we've had folks from the Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police, from the Ontario Police Association, Quebec Police, all the associations, including First Nations policing chiefs. And they made a couple of very simple but important messages that they shared with the government. They said, first, make sure that you look at what we have been working on in terms of coming up with a response on how we could reform bail. And they said, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Take a look at the questions on how to deal with mental health, how to deal with addictions, how to deal with appropriate community policing and having supports for people. And then you also have to make sure that those who do commit the crime, and serious crimes, are the ones who should be put and kept, and so that Canadians can feel safe and be safe in their communities. So the folks who have the serious issues, well, they get even harder fines. But for larger maximums, harder maximums that have already been put in place. And for the folks who need other services who are at a very little risk of being of committing a crime again, those are the people who we should make sure they get those other services.
Mr. Caputo, you've tabled this private member's bill. I mean, how do you strike the balance? When you look at the allegations here, and I have to stress that these are allegations, but there's a stabbing, an alleged stabbing, an alleged punching, a headbutting, and a gun offense in front of children. How do you strike this balance? Because it is a nuanced and difficult conversation.
Well, as MP Fergus stated, my heart goes out to those who are impacted. I mean, this is something that children shouldn't see if the allegations are truly borne out. In my view, we don't just look at this one case. What we really need to do is take a look back at what's happened over the last 8 years. And one of the reasons that I tabled this bill, and the primary reason, is that I've seen a consistent change in what a lot of people have called catch and release. And it's my view that we need change to the whole bail system, but we have to do that in a private member's bill. It has to often be incrementally. So I'm making what I would call one change to the, one small change or a slice to the larger bail pie. This comes from my experience in Parliament, but it also comes from my past experience as a Crown prosecutor who, as of 2021, was actually on the ground and seeing these changes. In my view, we have to look at all sorts of factors, including someone's background, things like that. But we have a small number of offenders particularly when it comes to guns, who are causing a disproportionate amount of serious criminality. And that's who we're looking at targeting with these bail reforms in the private member's bill I tabled today.
So, Mr. Fergus, this has been a consistent call now for a couple of weeks, and there have been a lot of the conversation about the statistics of violent crime going up over the Prime Minister's time in office. Whether that can be directly attributed to Justin Trudeau is a political argument that's playing out. But what about these changes that need to be made here, according to chiefs of police, according to the opposition, that seems to favor the specific nature of the accused rather than the specific element of the offense?
Well, first of all, let me say that to Frank's bill, private member, which was just published today, which I just had an opportunity to take a look at before we got in because it was just published this afternoon. I think when he takes a look at that one piece, and the reason why he's looking at that one piece, because he knows and we all know, and it's not a political argument, it's actually an argument that could be supported by the facts, is that we know that when we make changes into the bail system or into the justice system or the criminal code, it takes a number of years before it actually plays itself out and that we could actually see the effect of those changes. And that's appropriate for that to happen because you don't want to make dramatic changes too quickly and then discover that you've had a really big problem. So I think Frank's on, in terms of changing it, in terms of dealing with repeat gun offenses and increasing the fines which are associated with that, that's something that I think there's a lot of consensus around that issue. Indeed, those are the changes which we had made in the past to making sure that we've increased the offenses for people who are caught using guns for in inappropriate ways for criminal purposes.
So, but these examples and these arguments that you're hearing, does this cry out for rapid change? I mean, I know the Justice Minister, David Lametti, said he would have a conversation with his provincial colleagues, but how quickly can we expect to see something on this from your government?
Well, indeed, he's actually having, as you know, the federal government's responsible for the criminal code, but the administration of justice is responsibility of the provinces and territories. There has been a call for, and Minister Lametti has called for a federal provincial territorial meeting. They're going to be doing that in the next couple of weeks. This is something that has been worked on for there's been 10 meetings between deputy ministers of justice and of public security across the country to lead up to this meeting, which is going to be happening in a couple of weeks, so that we can move quickly, but in an appropriate way, and making changes to the criminal justice system as well as to bail reform, so that we can deal with these issues, which we know are the ones that are long-standing.
Mr. Caputo, I appreciate you've got a solution, as you see it, or a partial solution. Your private members, well, they take a long time to happen, if they get to happen at all. So, I mean, what do you want to see from the Justice Minister on dealing with this?
Well, I'd like to see a number of things. The biggest thing I want to see is action, and action now. When I came back from Christmas, I thought, look, we are really at an inflection point here when it comes to bail reform. Canadians are asking for this. Police chiefs are asking for this. Premiers are asking for this. So I was quite disappointed to see that the Justice Minister, after 8 years to make changes, hadn't made any changes. And that's why I thought, you know what, we as Conservatives, it's not that we shouldn't act, we really have a responsibility to act. And I agree with some of the points that MP Fergus made, but where we really part company is when we look at the fact that the Trudeau government, after 8 years in power, has really watered down some of the penalties, in my view, making conditional sentences available for things like robbery with a firearm. I mean, that's a very serious
Some of this was driven
offense.
by the courts, though, right? Some of the changes in sentencing and mandatory minimums were driven by Supreme Court decisions.
They were driven by the specific legislation, but if you look, for instance, at robbery with a firearm, I believe that mandatory minimum was constitutionally upheld at 4 years. And if I understand the law correctly now, a person can get a conditional sentence order for that and serve their sentence at home. Reckless discharge, discharge with intent. These are the types of drive-by shootings sometimes. Those aren't the types of offenses that, in my view and in the view of many Canadians, we should be giving house arrest for.
Right. So Mr. Fergus, I guess the last point on this, I remember during the debate over the invocation of the Emergencies Act, I heard cabinet ministers refer to the advice of the Canadian chiefs of police as a justification for this. Those same people are calling for bail reform now. Is that enough for you to move rapidly on this? Because they were cited as supporting evidence on a historic event a year ago.
Well, they're certainly a key constituency for people who really know what's going on and to want to make sure that it's part of their profession and their vocation to keep Canadians safe. So we listen to them very carefully. They have called for rapid movement. There is rapid movement. There will be a federal, provincial, territorial meeting on this issue.
But a meeting is not an outcome. A meeting is process.
Well,
right?
In a sense it is, except that there's been a whole process which is leading to this meeting so that there could be an outcome. So, like I said, there's been 10 meetings since the new year between the deputy ministers of Justice and Public Security. And they're going to be making sure that they're preparing the way so that when the ministers meet, there's an opportunity to move quickly and move forward and in a collaborative and coordinated way. As I said, it's one thing to change a criminal code, but there's also the work of making sure that we change the administration of that justice. And we know that, and as Frank had confirmed, it takes many years before you see the full result of that. And that's the reason why the time to act is now.
Mr. Caputo, last word to you.
I'm open to working with the Justice Minister to have this bill passed, to have it passed quickly. I hope that after 8 years, and we've seen a lot of deterioration when it comes to bail, that he will take my bill and run with it, and I'm happy to be a partner with him so that we can protect Canadians, which really is a bipartisan issue.
Okay, Greg Fergus, Frank Caputo, thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you.
Pleasure.